Mike here again with Lesson 5 of the Visual Studio 2013 C# Programming for Beginner tutorial series. Now I want to review some two methods for commenting code, since we'll be writing some more complex code as we go on, and from this point forward we'll be more in the code editor. I want to make sure you know how to comment your code properly. There's two different styles of comment. If you want to do a single line comment, all you do is prefix your comment with 2 slashes and type your single line comment. Now these comments can be in a line by themselves, or they can follow the end of a statement after the semicolon, and you could comment off to the right of each line as you go. So either way with a single comment. Now block comments work with a opening symbol here, which is the slash and the asterisk, and they end with the opposite, the asterisk first and then a slash. But they need to be together, no spaces, and you can type multiple lines of comments and then end the block that way. So those are your two styles of commenting you'll need to know about. Now I want to discuss some terminology that we're going to need to know as we move forward, so that everyone is on the same page and understanding what the different things are as we talk about them. But basically we start with variables, and they're used to store data needed by any of the programs you write. And then we have a term called methods, and methods basically contain one or more statements that perform a task in your program, and they usually manipulate the data or your variables in some way. And then we have classes, and classes contain both the methods and variables in your program, and are used for the basis of creating reusable objects in your program. And we'll get into classes more in a future lesson. And the namespaces are used to identify and organize one or more classes into related groups, and it also provides some safeguards for any naming conflicts between class names and variables as well. So just be aware of those terminologies, and we'll be okay. Now real quick, I want to mention one last thing about keywords. Here are all the keywords that are built into C#. You have what we call reserved keywords, or just keywords, and then contextual keywords. Any of these keywords you see here cannot be used as a name of a variable by themselves in your code. You can create a variable that contains any of these keywords, but you can't use it by itself to create a variable. So I just wanted to make sure you knew where to get those, and where to identify the keywords and use within C#. Now let's move on to naming variables. And it's a real simple rule that we want to follow, but one of the naming conventions is called camel case notation, and camel case is where you capitalize the first letter of each word in a multi-word variable, starting with the second word. So let's move down. I've got some examples already typed out. You'll see age is just a single word, so we're not going to capitalize that. It'll just be age, all lowercase. We've got date started, day of month, and student name. And as you can see, we skip the first word of each and then just capitalize the first letter in each remaining word after that. So those are examples of naming variables. And you also want to make sure that you're very consistent with naming your variables in your code. It's just going to make your code look cleaner and have a professional appearance. Now I've got another slide I want to show you, and this will get into some basic guidelines that you can follow. So as a beginner programmer, it's good to form some good habits, and this is one of them, naming. So we got 5 rules here. 1, which I've already mentioned, start with a lowercase letter, not an uppercase. 2, never start your variable names with an underscore, even though C# allows it. Now you can use underscores within the name, but it's not recommended to start it with an underscore before. It's kind of a syntax used in a lot of the old C programs, so stay away from that. Also, use the camel case style as mentioned. And rule 4, do not use all uppercase letters in your variable names. Uppercase naming is something that's reserved for creating constants, and we'll cover that at a later date, but just keep that in mind for variable names. Do not make them all uppercase. Use the camel case style as mentioned above. Number 5, do not have 2 variable names that have the same spelling. such as the examples I have, my age listed there 4 different times. It makes it very confusing looking at the code, and also if you write code that you want to be able to port and be used in another language like Visual Basic through the use of a DLL. Visual Basic is not case sensitive, so it won't matter. All 4 of those my age variables listed are the same as far as Visual Basic is concerned. But now in C# it is case sensitive. It will treat them separately, but it is confusing looking at it. So let's try to stay away from that habit. Now let's get into discussing declaring variables. And basically I want to say that before you can use a variable in your C# program, you will need to declare it with a data type identifier. And it's important to know what kind of data you want to store in your variable before you choose the exact data type to represent it. So I've got another slide that we're going to jump to real quick. That'll show a summary of the common data types. If you want to find out all the data types that are available in C#, you can just look in the C# documentation like we did when we looked at the keywords, and you'll find the other types in there as well. But these are the most common that you see throughout your programs, and we'll cover some of those in a bit. The data type column is just showing the exact keyword that's used in C# to define that data type. Possible values are listed to the right of that, and the data size in bits is just showing how many bits of memory it takes to represent that data type. So just being aware of the size of the memory types also is important when you're writing code, to make sure you're not overutilizing memory when it's not needed. So we are going to move on now into some examples, and got some examples of declaring some variables. I've written these out ahead of time so it will speed up this video process. But the 6 that we have listed here are short, int, char, string, bool, and decimal. And you can see the convention for creating a variable, or the syntax or rule, is you first type the data type that you want, followed by a space or some kind of white space, whether it be a tab or additional space. It doesn't matter how you line that up. You just have to have at least a single space between that. So you've got the type, that space, and then to the right of that, your variable name, and then you follow it by a semicolon immediately after that line. That completes the statement. So you've just, at that point, declared variables of those types. And I won't get into the different ones I had, but you can see, if you want to pause and review this and read the notes, you can. But that's basically how you're going to create variables. Very simple to do, just data type, then space, and your variable name that you want to use. Now, when we get into assigning and storing values into variables, the actual assignments happening here in the lines I have highlighted. Above that, we have our declarations. And you see I used a simplified notation. When you have multiple variables that have the same data type, you can list them on the same line. You just separate them by commas and end that entire line with a semicolon, making that a complete statement, C# statement. So I've done that already. But as far as assigning variables, the way you do that is with the equal sign. That's an operator that we can use to form an expression. And the first one, min age, is showing how you assign a literal value to a variable. And in this case, we assign 21 to min age. The second one is using an example of both a variable and a literal. And we're using an operator called the addition operator that will cause the compiler, C# compiler, when you build your program, do the following. It will evaluate, the way expressions work, it will evaluate everything to the right of the equal sign first. And then whatever that equates to, whatever that result is, it will assign it to whatever's on the left side of the equal sign, which is our variable. So if you're trying to get backstage in this case, when building this program, it will compile it, and what happens at runtime is it takes the value of min age, adds 44 to it in this example, which becomes 65, and then assigns it to max age. So max age will have the value of 65 in it after this line of code. You see two other examples below. One is using two variables, in this case an expression. We're taking the current year minus the start year to come up with the years worked. So for example, an employee, if they want to figure out how long they worked at their workplace, they could use a simple calculation like that with variables that would hold, we obviously have assigned the current year and the start year beforehand, and it could calculate the years worked. And the last example is just showing the use of a function called calculate sum. And this function has been designed in a way that when you pass in two variables, which are called input parameters or arguments, and they're num1 and num2, you separate each parameter by a comma, and the parameters are enclosed within an open and closed parenthesis, and that follows the function name directly. So what we've got here, whoops, I kind of moved that around a little bit. What we've got here is two variables that are passed in, num1 and num2, and when that function executes, it'll take those input parameters, and in the function, which is kind of like a black box, you can think of it that way, it will calculate the sum of those two numbers and then return back a result, which is then the result of this expression here, and that's assigned to the variable answer. So that's how a method would work as far as initializing a variable with a value. And we'll get more into functions as we get into that lesson, which covers functions exclusively, how to write them, both ones that return values and ones that don't, some with parameters, some without. Technically, a method is a term to use for something that does not return a value. As soon as you have a method that returns a value, it's then considered a function. But we use those terms interchangeably quite a bit. I'll refer to them back and forth. I'll try to stick with function if it returns a value, and method if it does not. So that's those are some examples on defining, declaring variables, and assigning values to those variables. So let's move on. The next thing I want to cover is, well, I'll tell you what, we're going to keep this short. We'll move on to the next. We'll save this for the next lesson. We'll end lesson 5 with what we have right now. We're trying to keep it short. And one thing I wanted to do, starting with this lesson and any future one, is to offer a challenge project to you, the viewers. And what the challenge project will do is allow you to reinforce what's been discussed in the lessons and previous lessons, and apply that to actually coding a simple application or project, whatever it may be that we'd assign for the challenge. But this lesson's challenge is for you, the viewer, to create a simple application that uses variables to add any two numbers and display the contents of those variables as well as the result to the console window. So again, you can pause and replay that if you need to, what I asked you to do, but it's important to really listen to what I'm asking you to do, and that will give you clues as to where to start, what type of application it's going to be, whether it's a console app or a Windows form app, and whether you're using straight literal values or variables to hold values and all that. So again, that's going to be it for our challenge project. I'll follow up with a challenge video that will show you one way how to do this, but try to create your project before you view that video so that you can see how to do it, and maybe if you can kind of compare it to what I've done, or and also you want to put your code or post your code in the comment area under this video, you can allow other viewers to see what you've done as well, and do some comparison. So I want to thank you for joining me, and I'll see you soon in lesson 6, where we will cover operators and just get a better understanding of the various operators in C#. Until then, take care.